Want one?
All right, well, thank you so much for attending these defenses. The students put a tremendous amount of work into these projects. What you're seeing is the finished product, but in many cases, they've been working on this for more than a year. A general idea about the way that the pattern for this will go, the student will have roughly 25 minutes to present the thesis. At that point, the committee will ask a series of questions. And then once we get done with that, the audience will actually have the opportunity to ask questions. And so they really, really like it if you try to think as difficult of a question as you can possibly get. So we're excited to be able to hear our second speaker, Brooklyn Hall.
Thank you. Good evening. Today I'll be presenting my honors thesis titled Beyond the Prescription, and we'll be focusing on sustaining quality of life in Alzheimer's disease through non-pharmaceutical therapies and intentional care. William Utermalen was born in Philadelphia and moved to study art in Oxford. In 1995, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease at the age of 61. Through his care for his Alzheimer's, his clinical team decided that he should continue his art specifically through self-portraits. This first portrait was prior to his diagnosis in 1967. The other portraits, starting in 1996 all the way to 2000, show the progression not only of his art decline, but also of the progression of his Alzheimer's disease. The progression of his self-portraits have been studied for years by researchers, as it shows not just the memory loss associated with Alzheimer's, but also the gradual loss of identity. Alzheimer's disease is a progressive neurodegenerative disease that affects memory, cognition, and behavior. It is distinctly associated with amyloid plaques, which are proteins that surround the receiving end of a nerve cell in the brain, and tau tangles, which are also proteins that are inside the cell body. Both of these disrupt cell-to-cell communication as nerve cells in the brain communicate through the synapse that surrounds each cell. Studies have yet to discover why exactly these plaques and tangles form, but risk factors include increased age, family history of the disease, and the presence of cardiovascular disease. Additionally, there has been a link associated with the APOE4 gene. So apolipoprotein E proteins, they carry cholesterol and other fats in the bloodstream. So recent studies suggest that the APOE form of this gene affects how brain cells process these fats, leading to an increased susceptibility to Alzheimer's disease. However, even now, researchers are still not fully understanding what causes this or why this happens. As mentioned earlier, the amyloid plaques and tangles disrupt cell-to-cell communication. Ultimately, this leads to cell death and eventually brain shrinkage, particularly in areas of the brain affecting memory. As you can see in this picture, this is a healthy brain. It is full, has gray and white matter, but as the disease progresses, the brain ultimately shrinks. This affects multiple areas of daily living as well, including eating, getting dressed, and controlling one's bladder, making it more and more difficult. Memory recall and verbal communication are also declining, and this often leads to depression, agitation, and aggression as the disease progresses. And for those diagnosed with the disease, the survival time is approximately 3 to 12 years. So how can caregivers help patients make the most of the time that they have left? Cleveland Clinic determined that approximately 1 in 10 individuals currently have Alzheimer's disease, with about 24 million people worldwide as of 2025. Currently, there is no cure for the disease, and more people are developing Alzheimer's. There are medication treatments that help manage symptoms, but they cannot completely slow down the progression. Alzheimer's disease presents major challenges in preserving the person behind the diagnosis. And I argue that non-pharmaceutical therapies, such as music, cognitive therapy, and exercise therapy, play a critical role in improving patients' daily lives and reducing reliance on medications and preserving their sense of self and independence. Current medications aim to target various symptoms associated with Alzheimer's disease. There are some medications, such as those that target the plaques, that help manage cognitive functioning decline. There are other medications, such as the group in the middle, that target other cognitive symptoms, such as the memory, problem-solving, and verbal skills that all decline as part of Alzheimer's. Finally, there are other pharmaceuticals that help manage behavioral and psychological symptoms, such as insomnia and agitation. As you can see, there are several medications available for the care of Alzheimer's, and while these medications can provide some symptom relief, they target symptoms alone. There is no cure, side effects can be detrimental, and some have a limited long-term impact that requires stronger doses to continue providing the same symptom relief. I'm sure everyone in this room has seen one or several of those commercials that talk about medications and have a person in the background that's frolicking and going about their day and seems all happy, while the voice in the background lists all the side effects of medication, such as nausea, headache, dizziness, urinary tract infections, and death. While medications are commonly used in Alzheimer's care, their effectiveness is limited. First, like I said, there is currently no cure. Most drugs are designed only to manage the symptoms, not the underlying cause of Alzheimer's. Second, the benefits are often modest, meaning people need more and more or stronger doses or more medications to provide the same symptom relief. Alzheimer's disease is not the only form of dementia. There is also dementia with Lewy bodies, as in the middle, and frontotemporal dementia on the right. While these have some distinct characteristics, there are several overlapping symptoms of all three forms of dementia, such as the memory loss, making it more difficult for medical professionals to accurately diagnose an individual. Another major limitation of medication is that different forms of dementia respond differently to different medications. For example, drugs commonly used to treat the cognitive symptoms in Alzheimer's disease, such as those that were listed in the middle column on the previous slide, can actually cause increased impulsivity for those who have frontotemporal dementia. Second, there's also a side effect of the antipsychotic medications used to treat Alzheimer's that actually causes fatal risks for those who actually have dementia with Lewy bodies. This is known as inappropriate prescribing, when a medical professional provides medication for a misdiagnosis which leads to harmful side effects. A 2013 study found that approximately 12 to 23% of Alzheimer's diagnoses are actually misdiagnosed, with about 67% of those individuals being on an inappropriate prescription regimen. There are some benefits of medication, but there are severe risks also linked to them. And as a whole, medications are not a one-size-fits-all treatment. Efforts should increase in examining alternative, more holistic approaches to Alzheimer's care to treat the person as a whole. The goal of medical professionals and caregivers should be to help the patient live better day by day rather than just to live longer. The three groups of non-pharmaceutical therapies are music therapy, cognitive therapy, and exercise therapy. A group of researchers in 2024 sent informational guides to caregivers to warn them about the dangers of inappropriate prescription. This study has yet to publish their results or fully collect all of their results, but this pushed me to create my own caregiver guide to provide awareness of what to expect with Alzheimer's, the current medications available to treat Alzheimer's, and alternatives to pharmaceutical therapies. And I made copies so that y'all can look at this while I finish my presentation. I made a brochure and a booklet as part of my project for my thesis. Go ahead.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sorry. Here we go.
Music therapy is one of the most well-recognized and most supported non-pharmaceutical interventions. It involves engaging patients through listening to natural sounds or familiar music, singing, dancing, and playing rhythmic games. Research has shown that music can reduce agitation, improve mood, and even enhance memory recall. In fact, a study emphasized the distinct difference between noise, which has harmful effects, and music, which has been shown to produce these benefits. One reason that this is highly effective is that musical memory is often preserved longer than other types of memory in the brain. Music creates a sense of familiarity, emotional connection, and it allows a patient to feel more grounded and less distressed. The second non-pharmaceutical therapy is cognitive therapy. This includes cognitive stimulation, which is group-oriented tasks and discussions, reality orientation, which is frequent reminders of time and place, and cognitive training, which are standardized tasks focusing on problem solving and processing speed and attention. Research shows that combining all of these approaches actually produces the strongest improvements in areas of the brain, such as working memory, recall, and verbal fluency. And it also helps with activities of daily living. Third, physical exercise is another highly effective intervention. Regular exercise increases blood flow and oxygen to the brain, allowing for these cell-to-cell communications to be strengthened rather than diminished. Exercise can improve memory, learning, and overall cognitive function, while also reducing the harmful processes associated with Alzheimer's disease, such as these plaques. However, consistency is key for this therapy. Even light walking or light aerobic exercise consistently produces very strong benefits. The Alzheimer's Association outlined an example of an exercise regimen to reach the 150 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic exercise per week that is nationally recommended. This example regimen includes moderate to intense aerobic exercise for about 30 minutes 4 times a week, 20 minutes twice a week of strength training, and 15 minutes twice a week of stretch and balance exercises. This regimen helps patients because it improves brain health, prolongs their independence, and allows them to complete activities of daily living on their own, which maintains independence. Exercise should be an initial line of defense to slow the cognitive decline. What makes these therapies particularly effective is that they actively engage the patient. Rather than passively managing symptoms with medications, they encourage participation, interaction, and stimulation across multiple areas of the brain. They also help maintain independence by allowing patients to continue performing tasks on their own and allowing them to make their own decisions. These approaches do not come with harmful side effects such as the medications, creating a balanced and effective treatment plan even if used in conjunction with medications. The journey of navigating dementia is one that no one should or really can do alone. People with Alzheimer's disease are too often left shut away in the back bedroom of a family member's house or in a nursing care facility with people who don't know how to fully care for that individual. There is value and need for the preservation of independence, relationships, and spirituality through intentional care to maintain a patient's sense of self, which in turn serves to improve their quality of life of the individual. Beyond these clinical outcomes, these therapies support something deeper, personhood. And identity or independence is a key component of identity. Georgia Tech found that each person daily makes about 35,000 decisions, from where to go to school or what to eat for dinner. Every decision, big or small, allows a person to maintain a sense of control over their own lives. Albert Jewell, editor of the book Spirituality and Personhood in Dementia, quotes Paul Tournier, who is a Swiss doctor and theologian, who says, "To live is to choose." As cognitive decline progresses, verbal communication declines, and it becomes increasingly important for caregivers to recognize the nonverbal cues of the patient, because when choice is removed, a person's sense of self will begin to diminish. Relationships are another essential component of personhood. Human identity is shaped and sustained through connection with others. For individuals with Alzheimer's, maintaining relationships with family, caregivers, and peers can significantly reduce depression and isolation. Jewel quotes in the book that God is in essence relational. As image bearers of God, humans are in essence relational, and no one should be denied the ability to maintain relationships with others. Finally, spirituality provides a sense of purpose, meaning, and comfort, even as cognitive abilities decline. However, spiritual care is too often neglected in the healthcare field, despite its strong impact on the overall well-being of the individual. The ancient Roman philosopher Boethius wrote The Consolation of Philosophy, in which he discusses how earthly powers and riches ultimately lead to dissatisfaction. Someone always has more, there'll always be more money to get, more power to have, or in this case, more medications to throw at Alzheimer's disease. However, he explains that consolation can be found in that all people seek to be happy. And as he writes, quote, since men want happiness, and since happiness is in itself divinity, then it follows that men in the pursuit of happiness are actually in the pursuit of divinity, end quote. Thomas Aquinas, author of Summa of the Summa, and Augustine, author of Confessions, come to the same conclusion. True fulfillment is only found in searching for the perfect creator of the perfect happiness. This conception of happiness is grounded in something beyond rational capacity. It's particularly relevant when considering those of dementia, because dementia can have the power to strip away one's cognitive function. But a person cannot lose his spirituality and tendency to feel deeply, which can in turn bring lasting happiness even after one's memory begins to fade. I've heard stories of family members who have had other family members or friends with Alzheimer's disease who may not know what the date is or where they are or the name of family members standing right in front of them, but they could sing every single word to a hymn. There's healing in music and there's power in spiritual care. Alzheimer's disease is more than a biological condition. It is a deeply human experience that affects identity, relationships, and purpose. And while medications provide some benefits, they're limited and can carry significant risks. Non-pharmaceutical therapies, such as music, cognitive stimulation, and exercise, offer meaningful ways to support patients beyond symptom management. Ultimately, care should not focus solely on prolonging life, but on preserving the dignity, identity, and personhood of each individual. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic job. Again, that was a tremendous amount of information, but you presented it in a way that, especially for those of us who are not familiar with the material, it's very easy to grasp, or certainly a lot more approachable. In one of there was a couple questions that I had that were specific to the treatment section. You mentioned in the musical therapy section that familiar music can be helpful. What do you mean by familiar, and why would that be especially helpful?
So familiar music is very individualistic. So it is music that is familiar to each person. So whether that's like gospel music, whether that's pop music, it depends on what the individual prefers or has grown up around, or versus it's not like one specific type of music provides the most benefit. It's a music that patient prefers. So because one study I was looking at, I was trying to determine if it's a specific type of music, like if it's nature sounds versus, like the calming classical music. But studies have found that it's not any one specific type of music. It's just what the patient themselves prefer.
What was connected to that person's history.
Yes.
Okay. Somewhat related, you mentioned how important is the ability for many of these patients to choose for as long as they can. So I was curious, what exactly does that choice look like as the as the illness progresses?
That's a great question. In my paper, I found or I talked about in my paper, there was one of the authors of Spirituality and Personhood. Each chapter is written by a different author. And one of the authors she was a caregiver for her mother who had Alzheimer's disease. And she talked about the difficulties associated with caring for her mother and how she, at first it was difficult because she thought she had to do everything for her mother. So she found ways of allowing her mother to make her own decisions and perform tasks independently, such as doing chores or picking out what to eat for dinner or where she wanted to stay in her house. And then ultimately, this led to the mom choosing to go to a memory care facility to be around like-minded individuals with Alzheimer's disease. And that choice also helped the mother flourish in a setting that had like-minded individuals. So choices like that are what's key in not treating the individual like a kid or like a baby, not trying to baby them but allowing them to know that they can make the decisions that they want, even if it's the small ones, such as what to eat for dinner, but allowing them to make every decision just to take the stress off of the caregiver as well.
Okay, so in your paper, what I noticed as you kept, it seemed like you were drawing a sharper line between medicine and these therapies that you kind of go into. And so, your argument kind of phrases it as an alternative, but a couple of times in your presentation, you kind of mentioned as an aside that some medicine could help, or even if it's combined with it. And so I kind of wonder, dream scenario or best case scenario, do you think that involves medicine plus these three, different types of therapies? Or do you think that the ultimate goal is to get away from medicine entirely and to just focus on these therapies? What are you thinking?
So as I mentioned with the exercise, I ended that section saying that exercise should be the initial line of defense. So that's kind of the view I take with these non-pharmaceutical approaches, is meaning that they should be an initial line of defense. So if it does get to a point where the agitation is beyond the control of the caregiver, beyond the control of the nursing home, medication can help facilitate some of those symptoms, but just continuing to implement these non-pharmaceutical therapies and using them first versus just jumping to medications, which has been, my experience shadowing multiple medical professionals. I've noticed that if a patient comes in with an issue, the doctor or the PA, their first reaction is, okay, well, let's put you on this medication. Let's do this. And in certain cases, that is the best option. However, through my research, and I believe that the first line of defense, especially with the severe side effects and yes, 20% isn't a huge amount, but with the 20% of misdiagnoses, I believe that there should be a non-pharmaceutical first, possibly pharmaceutical second approach. Mm-hmm. But it can be used in conjunction as well if that is what is needed.
Okay, good. That helps a lot. So in thinking about this, I've also thought about sort of this like larger sort of reaction against medicine that seems to be sort of like happening. Maybe it's just that I've become aware of it. Maybe it's been a longer trend, and so I wonder, like, when you're studying this, do you think that this is indicative of a larger problem within medicine I should clarify, within like healthcare, that they turn medicine first, not looking at alternative therapies? Or do you think that this problem is specific to Alzheimer's because of the like large percentage of misdiagnosis and things like that? Like, is this an Alzheimer's specific problem, or do you think that this might have deeper roots, I guess.
So I'll hit both sides of that
Okay.
question. So I do think it's a larger healthcare field as a whole issue, and it may not be every healthcare provider, and it's not everywhere, but it's becoming, and it may be that it's just becoming more and more known that this seems to be what's happening, and it may not be, as I've not done research on it specifically to know, but it may not be necessarily true for everybody, but in like from various studies and from my own personal experience shadowing, I've noticed a prescribe first approach, but then also with specifically with Alzheimer's, I do think that there is some there. Can you word how you worded that?
Like, is it a bigger problem in Alzheimer's because of the dangers of the side effects and the misdiagnoses? And
Yes. So I was actually talking about my project with somebody recently, and they were talking about their family member who has Alzheimer's and is like experiencing aggression recently, except for when they give their medication to their family member, and how they rely on that medication to even be around their family member now because it's gotten so severe. So I do think it's a healthcare field as a whole, but also specifically with Alzheimer's care. I do think a lot of times, and I also this summer experienced another patient who the daughter was with the mother who was experiencing memory loss, and the daughter was like, hey, can you get her on some medication to help her with her memory loss? So it's a lot of times because it's so publicized, medications on commercials or on social media or in doctor's office, it seems to be, this will fix it, so let's try this, but it doesn't fix it. It just manages it for a time.
okay.
All right. So you mentioned a couple of different types of dementia, and there are many more. So I'm curious what you've seen in terms of these alternative treatments for the various types of dementia, or are they specific to Alzheimer's?
I have not done the research specifically for those other forms of dementia. However, as a whole, these non-pharmaceutical therapies would be beneficial to everybody in this room because exercise is so healthy, and it, like I said, it brings oxygen to the brain, and it helps clear your mind, and it brings helps with memory and recall. And music is also healing, and it creates that emotional connection. And then the cognitive activities just help prolong your brain health. So I've not done research specifically on that, but I would assume that it would be beneficial to any medical condition.
Okay, perfect. And then I have another question about provider payer sort of relations, like everything depends on, and generally Medicare is driving payer and what insurance is paying for. So how does the provider who is oftentimes writing these prescriptions because those are going to get paid for, how do they tie that in with these alternative therapies? And then how do we get the payer to recognize the benefit to be able to pay for these? Because I'm also imagining they're not like a one-time deal. We can't go to one music therapy session and be healed, right? So this is more like a long-term issue. So how do we get that paid for?
So how to get that paid for, there would need to be more research into understanding the benefit of these therapies. However, the benefit of these therapies is that they can be done in the comfort of your own home. You can exercise in your own home. You can do brain games, and you can talk to people, and you can, if a caregiver is able to spend some time with their patient with Alzheimer's, then they're able to provide some of these therapies outside of needing it to be covered by insurance. Now, professionally, yes, it would need to be done in covered by insurance, and that was going to have to be covered with more research and understanding the benefits. And but I believe that there's some nursing homes that could easily implement this into just a normal day-to-day life of patients. And so, if any amount of a nursing home or memory care facility could be covered by insurance, then that would also be a factor that could be covered in that way.
Do you think there's any sort of provider education that could help support all of that to get them to also prescribe these things more often?
Yes, I definitely believe provide like one, more research going into this as a whole, but then also something as these brochures and the booklets for caregivers specifically to maybe look at these other approaches and maybe suggest these for their providers to ask about more specifically. But as a whole, if the provider learns more about these type of therapies and the benefit behind it versus just knowing that this medication treats this disease or this symptom rather, not the disease, but if more research is gained about these therapies, then I think providers as a whole would recommend them more, knowing that medications can have such harmful side effects.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you were able to pass them out. So I do have another question, but I did want to give you an opportunity. Walk us through a little bit what you decided to do with this particular material, like in terms of you have two different kinds, making sure that you get what information that the people need, of course, is going to be very important. How did you decide, like, how do I approach this? How do I provide the material to them in a way that like is going to be beneficial and that you actually provide the material that they need?
So I made two different forms, the pamphlet and the booklet, because a lot of times you'll see patients in the waiting room, you'll see patients in the waiting room reading the little pamphlets of different diseases, or a pamphlet like this is something that a doctor could give to the patient to understand the disease. They're not supposed to be this is everything you need to know about this disease. It is a brief and then a little bit more broad overview of the disease, the therapies, how to approach the therapies, and then why it's important as a whole. So that was my focus with these, is more so to provide some easily accessible information to patients, but also in the form of something that a doctor would give to a patient at the start of their Alzheimer's journey.
Okay. Semi-connected, what do you think the church's role is in this? And I'm not thinking something as abstract as love your neighbor. I think most people would say, yeah, sure. In this case, what does that actually look like for the church? Where can the church step in where these holes apparently might be?
That's a great question. Also, in that Spirituality and Personhood and Dementia book, that same lady I was mentioning earlier, who is having to overcome these difficulties associated with her mother developing Alzheimer's and the daughter becoming her caregiver, the mother became involved in a church in her 40s, and she came to Christ in her 40s. And this church provided, when she developed Alzheimer's, it became a sense of peace, and it became like I said, like you were mentioning, like a love your neighbor kind of thing. And they would bring the mother to church, and they would provide meals if needed. They would bring the mother to different activities at the church, just very much reaching her where she was, rather than expecting her just to show up and experience church passively. And then it also brought the daughter to Christ as she became a Christian in her 40s after experiencing the love that the mother felt by the church. So as a whole, the church should be there not to just welcome them at church, but should reach out to them and seek to fill their needs as possible. And that can come through providing some relief for the caregiver. So whether that's being a carpool ride or being there to help with such of these therapies of music therapy, or being somebody who can go on a walk with the patient just to help them incorporate these non-pharmaceutical therapies into their daily lives and provide relief for the caregiver.
Would there be any sort of training that the church might need to be able to provide some of these therapies, or at least support in them?
The biggest therapy would just be to know that these individuals do have declining memory, that they may not be able to move as long. So the training would more so just be, hey, like make sure you're aware of this and of what to expect rather than any formal training. Now, specifically for music therapy and how to perform these like rhythmic exercises, such as like with like drums or something, that could be some training, but most of the time it's not necessarily needing to be a training to be able to perform these exercises. It's more just utilizing your brain in various areas, which can be done as simply as us having this conversation today.
What about those, which this will be my last question and I'll hand it over. What about those individuals who don't have a faith element? Like, I know you mentioned the church was vital to the one particular person and they came to faith, but what if they have opted out and simply are antagonistic in that particular way? How can they take advantage of that particular element?
That is also a great question. I did not exactly research that side because I was assuming that most people are in pursuit of happiness. So in some form, most people are in pursuit of some sort of religion. But there are people who don't have a religion. But that's also where a local church, if they know of a person who has this disease, can at least just be a neighbor to that person, can at least reach out to them if they know of the individual. And providing that love that comes with spirituality, even if the individual doesn't believe, but that's more work on the people surrounding that individual. So for that individual individually, that is an aspect of this intentional care that would be missing, but they can still experience the benefits of relationships and the benefits of independence.
Okay.
Okay, so similar to a question Dr. Jacobs asked earlier where he was talking about choice and kind of how long that goes, I was thinking about that in terms of your therapy options. So when you're sort of advocating for these alternatives, do you sort of envision that being treatment, that as soon as they're diagnosed, they pursue those forms of therapy for the rest of their life? Do you think that, especially like when you were talking about, you showed the slide where like the brain actually gets smaller, do you think that there's a certain point where this type of therapy is not going to help anymore and it's just about making them comfortable or I don't know, how long is this ultimately meant to just slow the progression, lengthen the time that they stay themselves? I don't know. How do you sort of see it long term?
So as I mentioned also, as a whole, these therapies really should be implemented by everybody,
right?
From as early as you can. But specifically with those just diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I do believe that they should start those as soon as possible, get that as part of their daily routine. And as for how long I do believe that it should just be done as long as they're able to. And I do think that there comes a point when they've lost their whole sense of identity and they don't know where they are. They're so agitated that they can't understand. But as I also said, the survival time of Alzheimer's typically is 3 to 12 years. So as a whole, this isn't going to last super, super long if it's done right at the start of the diagnosis. So I do think that a patient should just continue these as long as they're able to. And if they're not able to get up and moving, then at least listen to familiar songs, because besides just helping them maintain a sense of self, music, like I was saying, can reduce agitation and it can reduce feelings of depression or anxiety. So they have benefits even if the person can't, even if the caregiver doesn't know that the patient is experiencing those benefits.
So I had a question I forgot to ask earlier, which is that you mentioned the 67% inappropriate prescriptions. So do you have any ideas of what could be done to affect that, to reduce that number?
More research into developing imaging to confirm diagnoses, because I know there's MRI imaging that can give a medical professional a pretty good idea that it is Alzheimer's versus other forms of dementia. However, like I said, there's 12 to 23% that have been misdiagnosed. And a lot of times they can't confirm it until an autopsy after the individual dies. So as a whole, there should just be more research into developing better imaging techniques or better diagnosis strategies. But then also limiting the medications and relying more on these non-pharmaceutical therapies would also limit the amount of inappropriate prescribing that is implemented.
Sorry, to piggyback off of her question, do you see these non-pharmaceutical therapies as slowing the progression of the disease at all, or lengthening the amount of time that cognition can be maintained?
I do believe so. As long as you're using your brain, there's neuroplasticity. So your brains connect, like, as you're using your brain, it builds new signals. And as you learn, it builds new signals. And so the more you use your brain, the more you increase the oxygen that reaches your brain, the more you build that emotional connection through music, your brain's going to be as healthy as it can be. There's a point where nature overcomes this and these plaques just keep building, or these tangles keep interrupting cell-to-cell communication. But as a whole, these therapies would provide that relief for longer than not being on it at all.
Thank you.
Okay. At this point, we will open up questions to the audience, and you can sort of field them as you like.
Yes.
Well done, Brooklyn.
Thank you.
It's very accessible, like as you said, very approachable as well. The first thing I'm just kind of wondering is, in your research, were you able to find any talk, I guess, of, I know there's no cure, but causes? I mean, being able to pin down like what has caused this to also increase, I guess, over the years, or do we just have kind of any ideas of correlations? And so I'm asking that because I believe no one here has Alzheimer's, and so if there are things we can kind of avoid or things we can do to maybe prevent it, or hopefully even if we have the possibility of having it in the future, I guess prolong our lives the way it is right now before we have to do anything else.
So increased age, which is not something that anybody can control, but also just not using your brain can increase one's susceptibility to Alzheimer's, just because if you're not continuing to build those like connections in between your nerve cells. But then also there is family history. So if your family has the APOE4 form of the gene, then you're more susceptible. But just because you're more susceptible doesn't even necessarily mean you're going to develop Alzheimer's. So really just taking care of your body, taking care of your health, maintaining exercise, eating healthy, and using your brain is just the best way to fight developing it, even though there's really no way to stop it if you're going to get it. But also there was a study I found between, that was actually done in rats, but it found a connection between prenatal alcohol exposure and Alzheimer's disease. So basically if a mother does not drink while pregnant, then there's a decreased susceptibility to Alzheimer's.
And also just, this is just your personal, well-researched opinion from a Christian perspective. I know we talked about the faith, and I think that was very interesting to see that I don't think you had the faith or spirituality as a specific form of therapy, I guess, that can help, but it kind of played into everything from music, like hymns, or to the cognitive part, which I think is important. And that's what I want to ask about, that the studying of scripture and stuff that could help the brain. The exercise would be curling Bibles, I don't know, but what I'm trying to ask is, at what point, from your Christian perspective, do you think the faith could be affected if people that actually have faith in God or some type of God, when they start to lose the cognitive person, like, is there a point where they can't even worship God and that's kind of affected the whole thing?
there may be a point when they can't sing songs because they can't talk, or they may not be able to, they may not look like they're even present, like mentally, like, when people look like they're checked out. There may be times when when it gets to a point where these individuals reach that point. However, there's been studies that prove the connection between spirituality and Alzheimer's, and showing that even then it still reduces agitation and it still produces calming effects. And this is even in the Bible talking about how like daily scripture reading is so beneficial, but also just being surrounded and in the presence of God produces so much healing. And so I don't think that there's a point when anybody should be denied the ability to be in the presence of God. Yes.
You mentioned not using your brain leads to an increased risk in developing Alzheimer's. It seems to me that even if you're doom scrolling, to some extent you're using your brain. So what are some ways to use your brain other than learning? Because not everybody wants to learn or research all the time, or reading.
Yes, so there's different forms of cognitive therapy, because there's group-oriented tasks. So just having communication with other people, talking to other people. There's been studies that show walking and talking, that's one of the first things to go when a person develops dementia as a whole. They can't multitask. So multitasking, and even though everyone says don't multitask, it is as long as the person can multitask, or quote unquote multitask, there's an improvement of the brain. The brain is still functioning well. And so once that ability diminishes, then there's more of a susceptibility to cognitive decline. So just, yes, doom scrolling is such a prevalence these days, but just taking time to touch some grass and get outside, but also just engaging in conversations with people and making sure that you still know what the date is and where you're at, and not just doom scrolling for hours.
Question and a comment. So I don't think that pharmacological and non-pharmacological interventions have to be mutually exclusive of each other. Okay, so I think, I don't know, I may have just taken it in that that was kind of coming across, and I may have totally misunderstood, and I'll give you the opportunity to tell me I'm wrong. But I think the non-pharmacological interventions, definitely need to be done. Right now, everybody in this room needs to be doing non-pharmacological interventions to prevent Alzheimer's. However, the risk in promoting by not taking pharmacological medication that has been scientifically tested to decrease the accumulation of these proteins, I think that's very dangerous. Because as a cancer survivor, as you can have a diet that will help fight cancer. However, you don't get any do-overs, okay? So what if you don't pick the right diet? But we know that there's a pharmacological drug out there that has been proven through scientific evidence-based research, okay? There may be some side effects, but has been proven effective. So do you withhold that pharmacological treatment to do the non-pharmacologicals? I would say no. Okay, so what is your opinion? Are you saying don't try the pharmacological treatments and do the non-pharmacological interventions, or can you do both?
So there was a study that I found with the medication Crocin and exercise, and it did show that there's a significant benefit in reduction of those plaques and protein buildups. It was done in rats, but it did show it when done together. So like your point, there are times when it is best done together. However, my personal opinion is to stay more away from medications just because of the severe side effects. But that's not my profession. I would never tell somebody to just stay away from the medications. As a whole, it's more of be aware of the side effects and to not rush to a medication just to reduce depression or reduce agitation for Alzheimer's, when there are other approaches that have also been proven to produce like strong benefits.
And your medications that you're giving for aggression and those may be like anxiety reducing medications too.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing, you mentioned something, I was waiting for Shauna for you to say something. You mentioned how important communication was. Okay, so there's something very simple. I mean, if are there five women in this room that are 45 or older? You know, because that statistic says 1 in 5. One of us has Alzheimer's, like right now at 45.
65. 1 in 10 at 65.
It's a one in.
Oh, for women, yes. Sorry, I forgot that one.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so
1 in
I'm
5.
gonna go back to my question then. So if communication is, one of the preventatives, what's a really simple thing? What makes people not communicate? Super, super common. Why do, I'll say men, not communicate?
Well, I would say technology.
I know, not technology. Loss of hearing. Okay, so we happens to women too, but
Mhm.
a lot more men. So I think that's one thing. Can you make the connection between loss of hearing and cognitive impairment?
Well,
and
yes.
Alzheimer's?
Yes, I mean, if you're not able to hear, you're less likely to communicate and you're more likely to just stay inside your own mind and not reach out to others or not engage in the activities such as the group-oriented tasks that help with cognitive stimulation. So there's definitely there would be a strong correlation between hearing loss and any form of like cognitive decline.
So what could you do to encourage not having hearing loss?
Protecting ears with protect like earplugs for working
That's
would
where I'm
help.
going.
Limiting loud music exposure.
Okay, that's not where I'm going. You're too young to even know about this.
What are you thinking?
Hearing aids.
Oh, hearing aids, yes, would help.
Encouraging the use of hearing aids.
I thought you meant prior to hearing loss, sorry.
People to wear
Yes.
hearing aids.
Yes, definitely.
Could be considered a prevention. I would
Yes.
think. Bobby, you can help me on that one.
Yeah, that does help with that cognitive decline.
Definitely like limiting the stigmatism around hearing aids too, because I know a lot of people especially if they're younger and they have to have hearing aids, they want it to look very minimal or they're expensive, and so they're like, I'll be fine. So just making sure that that information is provided to everybody that it is an important medical device.
Really important.
Yes.
So heaven forbid, like you do totally lose your hearing and you can't see to do sign language or anything. Like what are other ways to kind of use your brain? Or like what do you recommend? How do you use your brain?
Well, using your brain, puzzles, as long as you can still see, like Sudoku or word searches, or like my grandma, she has a very sharp mind, and every single day she does the New York Times Wordle and the word searches, and she does the connections. So just different tasks that make you think and that push you to build connections between words or build connections between concepts. Anything as a whole, that even if it doesn't involve communicating, but just working your brain.
Do you think just kind of really just kind of meditating and thinking just about whatever, just kind of thinking in depth about simple things would help as well?
I do think that, yes, it would help. And I do think that ties into spirituality. Even if it's not necessarily a spiritual meditation, it is still in pursuit of understanding one's identity and purpose on earth. And that's the whole purpose of spirituality as a concept, as defined by the author of the Spirituality and Personhood Dementia. He defines it as just searching for your purpose on this earth. So yes, definitely.
And well done.
Thank you.
Don't leave yet. The committee just has to do one or two housekeeping matters, and then we'll come back and say something more.
It's not something that can be done overnight, unfortunately.
Absolutely not.
Nice job.
Thank you.
I was under time by 3 minutes.
All right, Ms.
That's
Brooklyn,
bad.
you wanna-
I'll take it.
Now, while Brooklyn is making her way down here, one of the things that is unique about the program is how much the students have to rely on each other as they go through the learning process. And so one fun tradition that they get is they get to offer words of honor to each other at the end of the semester. Well, faculty members like to have fun too. So Brooklyn, here you go. Your tremendous ability runs hard with your commitment to excellence and falls only second to your generous desire to serve others and populate the GB wing with origami figures. Thank you for that. We probably have like 30.
At least.
At least. Thank you for ardently pursuing the qualities of Proverbs 31, for aspiring to noble things and wishing to surpass them all. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I gotta do the awkward picture thing, so. That's an aggressive. All right, we'll get started.
Okay,
on the
I
next
need
one
some
in just a
origami
minute.
figures then.
I've made so many swans. Okay.
You did a great job.
I've got to run, but you did great.
Thank you.